2022 was an exciting year for gaming. Tons of big blockbusters and smaller high-quality titles were released throughout the year, many of which received critical acclaim and many others that were a little controversial and left the community with split opinions. Fans of any genre were able to find something to love and play. I played a lot of games this year and decided to make a list of my personal top 10 favorite titles that were released in 2022. Unfortunately, because of the huge amount of awesome stuff, I was unable to play every game that piqued my interest. So for example, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Triangle Strategy, River City Girls 2, or The Somnium Files 2, even though they look like I might love them, won't be showing up in this list. Also, a small shout out to Escape Academy, which seems quite fun from the little I played it, but unfortunately I did not play it enough to put it on this list. Oh, and a new version of Stanley Parable has been released, and Stanley Parable is awesome. However, it's an old game with some new content, so it won't be showing up here on this list either. And let me quickly mention that this is not a list about objective quality, but rather just how much fun I was having with these games. But anyway, let's get to it, starting with my number 10. Number 10. Although the golden age of point-and-click adventures was around 2 decades ago, every now and then we still get a gem belonging to this genre from a bygone era of computer games. LucasArts made so many amazing games back in the day, the wonderful Monkey Island series being among their most beloved ones. When it was announced that Ron Gilbert was going to make Return to Monkey Island, I got excited, and when I finally got to play it, I was really loving it. The art style is unique and charming, the puzzles are fun and engaging, and the characters and the dialogue are simply great and absolutely hilarious. Unfortunately though, without spoiling anything, the ending left a really sour taste in my mouth, which prevented it from being higher on this list. I was actually considering not putting it on my list at all because of that, as it felt like a punch in the gut and left me rather baffled. But then again, I was having such a good time until then, it would be unfair not to include it. I'm kinda curious to hear what other people thought, as I imagine the ending to be quite polarizing, so please leave a comment on what your thoughts were. But please, keep spoilers to a minimum. Number 9. Cats are awesome. They're cute, they're funny, they can be affectionate, and they can be completely random. So being able to play as one of our feline friends in Stray got everyone rightfully hyped. You control an orange tabby cat through a strange post-apocalyptic world inhabited by adorable robots that live in a strange underground society. And you must find your way back up to the surface after you got separated from your friends. It's a short, cute, funny and emotional adventure for anyone who likes the idea of having a dedicated meow button. Number 8. Another strange post-apocalyptic world. But this time you're not playing as a cute cat, but as one of Nintendo's cutest protagonists, Kirby. This is Kirby's first 3D adventure, and it's working really well. Each stage you get to explore has a lot of secrets and hidden goals to uncover that motivate you to revisit them, replay them with the different copy abilities that Kirby can use, and find all of the kidnapped Waddle Dees and rebuild their hometown. Watching the town grow is so satisfying, and it's a nice and chill place to just hang out in. It looks great, it controls great, and it's just fun and pleasant to play. Number 7. I am a 90s kid, and I like beat-em-ups. And like many 90s kids, I like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Or Hero Turtles, as they were called in Europe. Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo is considered a classic. But sadly, I only got to play it briefly at a friend's place when I was like 8 years old. But even my short encounter with the game left quite an impression on me. Now with Turtles, Shredder's Revenge, a new super fun and incredibly charming beat-em-up has seen the light of day. It flows well, the graphics are beautiful, the stages are quick and fun, and there's an incredible attention to detail everywhere. And apart from our 4 Hero Turtles, you get to play as April and Master Splinter as well. The game is awesome and I still replay it every now and then, so it definitely deserves a spot on this list. Number 6. Moving on from beating up robots and mutants as a humanoid turtle, to beating up gangsters as a martial artist. Sifu feels a bit like a classic Eastern with plenty of punching and kicking. You play as a young martial artist who witnessed their dad, a kung fu master, being murdered in front of their eyes when they were just a kid. Years later, you're a fighting expert yourself and move out to take revenge on the people behind your father's death. Helping you to fulfill this task is an artifact that lets you come back from the dead whenever you die. However, when you're killed, you age. And when you're too old to fight, it's game over for you. And death is almost inevitable, as this game is tough. Really tough. But the combat is really good, and once you master it, you feel like a martial artist, and then you are able to beat up an entire room of gangsters without receiving a single hit, which is super satisfying. The art style is cool too, and there are plenty of homages to movies like Oldboy. And the game occasionally becomes quite surreal as well. If you like a challenge and this style of gameplay, I definitely recommend checking it out, as it's truly amazing. Number 5. I must admit, I'm not a fan of the original God of War games. As for one, character action games in general are just not my thing. But also, I found Kratos just to be such an unlikable jerk, even though I appreciated the setting and the brutality in which these legendary characters of ancient mythology were being treated. The God of War game that was released in 2018 was more up my alley, both in terms of gameplay, story and characters, but I still didn't consider it to be the masterpiece that most people saw in it. I enjoyed playing it for the most part, but I had too many problems with certain gameplay choices to really like it. And although many of these problems are still present in God of War Ragnarok, I enjoyed the overall package a lot more. So much in fact, that it absolutely earned its place in my top 5 favorite games of the year. The story, the characters and the dialogue are all really well done, and I was on the edge of my seat to find out what would happen next. I even grew to love and care about Kratos, which is super strange to me, and Christopher Judge did an amazing job playing this role. It's a very challenging game too, which I always appreciate. However, one of my problems is the combat, as many of the battles just go on too long for my taste, with even standard enemies having too much health. Another problem is the level design. You oftentimes need to backtrack through previously visited areas, if you want to uncover secrets with abilities you find later in the game, or if you are a completionist and simply want to find something that you missed before. Backtracking itself is fine, but having to do it through empty hallways that just stretch on and on for minutes on end is just painful. Still though, I did enjoy the amount of stuff that can be discovered in this game, and the plethora of optional content and challenges. And I love the fact that near the end of the game, there is a ginormous optional area with plenty of side quests that can be skipped entirely, and that area was actually my favorite part of the game from a gameplay perspective. This might be my favorite Sony title in years, and I'm quite curious to see where the series goes next. Numbers 4 and 3. Okay, this is probably a little controversial, especially considering that I put both these games higher on my list than the extremely polished and immaculate God of War Ragnarok, but I love both major Pokemon titles that were released this year. Both Legends of Arceus and Scarlet Violet were amazing in my book. Arceus was probably the more innovative of the two, with fewer bugs and better performance, which is strange. But Scarlet Violet took the old formula and interpreted it in a refreshing way. So it's a little hard for me to say which one I enjoyed more. Of course, I cannot ignore the fact that releasing a game in Scarlet and Violet state is downright audacious. The Pokemon Company has so much money. They have the resources to create the perfect game. But instead, they rush things when they could just take their time and fine-tune everything and create the game that this franchise and the fans deserve. So I'm a little angry at myself for loving the game as much as I do. I have to say though that I never encountered anything game-breaking, or anything as bad as I have seen in those countless bug compilations. And overall my game only crashed once. Also, I must admit that I don't think this game is ugly. Stylistically, it can even be quite pretty. It's just that the poor frame rate, lighting, pop-ins and low amount of detail dragged down what could be quite decent to look at. But man, Scarlet and Violet are just so much fun. It feels like Pokemon was always meant to be an open world game, and in many ways it is the Pokemon game that I've always wanted ever since I was a child. And Arceus does making things like catching the little monsters just so addicting. It's fast and you're encouraged to catch as many as you can, even of the same type. The way you fill out the Pokédex is such a breath of fresh air, and even the setting feels different. You're in an age where Pokemon were still considered terrifying and threatening, and people are very suspicious of everything and everyone they're not familiar with, including the player. The way the game starts out almost makes it feel like the Dark Souls of Pokemon games. simply because of how hostile everyone and everything is towards you. People telling you they're gonna cast you out if you're not being useful to them is pretty much the equivalent to Elden Ring's line, "Go off and die in a ditch somewhere," at least by Pokemon standards. The amount of times the protagonist frowns at the beginning of the game is so uncommon in this franchise, where people are generally kind and friendly to one another. Arceus also manages to give you a feel for what wild Pokemon are actually like. They all have different kinds of behavior towards the player. Some are shy and run away once they spot you, some are aggressive and attack the player. Some are passive and don't give a darn if you're there or not. And some actually seem kinda curious and docile and walk up to you without trying to kill you. But there's also room for improvement, like showing Pokemon interacting with one another, fighting for territory or something like that. Anyway, I really loved both these games, and I'm already looking forward to the next one. Also hoping that the backlash will finally motivate the publisher to not rush things out anymore. Number 2. I've been a Zelda fan ever since I was a child, with Link's Awakening being one of my favorite games of all time. There are very few games that manage to replicate the sense of exploration and puzzle design in the way Zelda does, let alone bring something new to the table. But here we are. Tunic absolutely captivated me. It is a loving homage to Zelda, and at the same time it is something incredibly unique. You play as an adorable little fox, exploring a Zelda-like overworld while fighting tough enemies and solving countless puzzles. And the way it is done is quite ingenious. Most of the game's in-game text is written in a runic language that you won't be able to understand. And same goes for the in-game manual, which is an integral part of the gameplay. The game's mechanics are just as mysterious as the world itself. You need to find pages of the manual to find out how certain things even work. And it's covered in riddles and clues on how to progress. The art style is really charming and the music is amazing as well. I think some of the boss fights are a little too difficult for what the game is trying to be, and I do have an issue or two with the game's final puzzle, but overall the experience was so motivating and gratifying, I think these problems are forgivable. The less is said about the game's features, the better, and I mean that in a positive way, as I recommend this game to anyone who's remotely interested in this type of game, and to just experience it themselves. Number 1. Hype is a dangerous thing. I usually keep a healthy amount of skepticism with every game that's being developed. And the same went for this one particular game being made by this one particular developer that made many of my most beloved games. But it seems like there was no way around it. My skepticism was unnecessary, and my favorite game of the year, and probably the latest addition to my list of favorite games of all time, Elden Ring just blew me away. I love Demon's Souls and Dark Souls, and the thought that FromSoft would manage to lift its formula to a new level was unimaginable to me. Or rather, the thought they would manage to transport the Souls gameplay into an open world. As the Metroidvania-like level architecture was always an important part of the formula, but from the amazing art style to the level design to the combat, everything is as great as I hoped it was going to be. Exploring the lands between, encountering its strange inhabitants, fighting demigods and horrific monsters, and leveling up my character's stats was more motivating and addicting than ever. The different parts of the land offered so much variation in terms of biomes and enemy types, and there are secrets to be found wherever you go, be it dungeons, or NPCs with obscure side quests, or hidden bosses, or just some cool items. The ability to summon ashen ghosty friends during certain situations is a neat addition. And jumping attacks are my new favorite way to deal damage. The legacy dungeons are top-notch in terms of design, and even though I combed through them dozens of times, I still discover new things in them, and the bosses are some of the best that FromSoft has given us. And some of the toughest. Malenia must have been my toughest FromSoft battle to date. I believe either the Fume Knight from Dark Souls 2 or a certain hidden boss in Sekiro held the record for most attempts before, but no joke, defeating Malenia took me 3 times as many tries. And despite that, I think she is still a well-designed and motivating boss encounter. There are some issues that I consider minor, like the optional dungeons feeling a bit repetitive and copy-pasted, the hero graves being kinda infuriating, and several minor bosses getting recycled over and over again, but all in all, Elden Ring is the gift that just keeps on giving. It's a masterpiece, and I will revisit the Lands Between for years to come. Well, That was my list of favorite games released this year. What about yours? Feel free to post your top 10 or top 5 or whatever in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. I hope you have an amazing year 2023.